Welcome back, dear friends. Today, we're jumping into the inspiring and enchanted story of Christmas. Before we start, let me wish each and every one of you a Merry Christmas filled with love, joy, and the warmth of togetherness. The story of Christmas is one of hope, generosity, and the enduring spirit of kindness. It's a tale that brings families together, spreads happiness, and reminds us of the true meaning of the season, sharing love and light with everyone around us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more inspiring stories and magical moments. So now, let's begin. Grab a cup of cocoa, sit back, and let the spirit of Christmas fill your hearts as I share this special story with all of you. Bringing up my brother's premature birth at Christmas dinner to get my parents to shut up. I am a 32-year-old man, am a nurture specialist specializing in maternity care. I work with a part of low-risk maternity cases, making a difference in eager moms through sound pregnancies and postpartum recuperation. My fiancée 31-year-old, who is in her residency, and I have been together for a long time and live together. We initially arranged to hitched a handful a long time prior, but life got active with work and other duties. Whereas we're not in a surge, we have a wedding date set for June. My guardians, be that as it may, are exceptionally devout and conventional. They've made it inexhaustibly clear over the long time that they dislike us living together, sometime recently in marriage. My father has gone as distant as comparing me to my more seasoned kin, who all either held up until marriage to move in with their partners or got hitched quickly a while later. They're tireless in their comments, always attempting to guilt or disgrace me into adjusting to their desires. For setting, this isn't the primary time my guardians have pushed their values on me, and I've made it clear that I won't endure it. When I visit them, I do not indeed remain at their house, since it's simpler to dodge strife by booking lodging. This Christmas, the total family accumulated at my parents' house, making it an enormous celebration with 17 people, my guardians, my 3 kin, their life partners, 7 grandchildren, my fiancé, and me. Everything was going well until supper, when my mother decided to bring up how glad she was that we were finally getting hitched so she wouldn't get to be embarrassed at church any longer. My father chimed in with his normal spiel, almost how pleased he is of my more seasoned kin for doing things the correct way, including how disillusioned he's been in me for not taking after their illustration. My fiancé was awkward, and I was raging. This wasn't an unused argument, it's been repeated endless times, despite my rehashed demands to let it go. But hearing it once more, particularly at a family supper before everybody, was the ultimate straw. To move the discussion and make a point, I began talking approximately an untimely infant I'd as of late studied around. This infant, born nearly 3 months early and weighing a fair 1.6 pounds, was flourishing within the NICU. I portrayed how momentous it was, knowing full well where I was directing the discussion. As anticipated, my guardians quickly got awkward, giving each other deer-in-the-headlights looks. That's when I casually said to my most seasoned brother, who was born almost 4 months premature. I inquired in case we might see through the family collection afterward to affirm his birth's subtle elements. For setting, I as of now knew my brother's birth points of interest. He was born full term, weighing over 9 pounds and measuring nearly 23 inches long. My grandma had spilled the beans a long time back amid one of my parents' prior endeavors to disgrace me. She made it clear that my mother was as of now in her moment trimester when my guardians got hitched. The room fell quiet, and the subject was rapidly changed. After supper, my guardians pulled me aside, clearly disturbed. They denounced me for airing private family matters and embarrassing them before everyone. I calmly told them that on the off chance that they ever brought up my living courses of action once more, I would make beyond any doubt to remind everybody approximately their past. My fiancé was diminished that the subject appeared to be off the table for great, but my guardians are still irate. They think I was out of line for bringing up their private history and attempting to manage how they carry on in their claim domestically. I think they had it coming. I'm tired of their judgment and refusal to acknowledge my choices. On the off chance that they can't regard my life, they shouldn't be shocked when I thrust back. Story 2. I was excluded from my family's Christmas dinner. Until this happened. Christmas is gathered to be a time of family, warmth, and fellowship, but this year, my occasion plans were totally crashed by a strife I never saw coming. I've continuously looked forward to family Christmas suppers, but this year, things went south, and I found myself in an extreme position. I was almost to be avoided from the supper since I basically couldn't manage it. But the story didn't conclusion there. This startling turn of occasions driven to a tremendous family confrontation, parts of feelings, and eventually, a shocking determination that brought us all back together. Remain tuned as I share the whole insane travel of what happened and how we spared Christmas. Each Christmas, my family has accumulated at my parents' house for an enormous feast. The convention has continuously been to share the costs, and no one has ever had to stress almost cash or what they're contributing. But final year, everything changed. My brother and his spouse chosen to have Christmas at their put for the primary time, and whereas I was cheerful for them, things didn't go as easily as arranged. They were pushed out, and there were a part of issues with the nourishment, particularly considering my dietary confinements. I couldn't offer assistance much with the arrangements final year since I was living in a diverse city, but this year, things would be diverse. Presently, I live within the same city as my brother, but there's one capture. I'm a understudy, and cash is amazingly tight. My brother and his spouse win altogether more than I do, so when the duty for Christmas supper was part between them and my guardians, I had to figure out a way to contribute. Since I'm a gifted cook, I volunteered to take over the feast arranging and cooking, but the issue was, I couldn't bear the total dinner. My commitment would be the organization and cooking of the devour, but the fetch of the fixings was a tremendous concern for me. Some weeks back, I sent out a nitty-gritty breakdown of the menu and the costs included. I thought everybody would be on board with it, particularly since we'd done something comparable in past a long time without issues. But my brother was not upbeat almost the fetched. Presently, let me tell you. The cost wasn't extraordinary, it was far more than in regular dinner. He's continuously been cheap, and whereas I get it that, I wasn't arranged for his response. He needed to cut back on the menu, but when I proposed evacuating one of the sides, he denied. That's when things took a turn. He demanded on cutting my dish, the one I was making for myself since of my dietary limitations. This dish was the one thing I might eat without requiring to compromise, and it was moreover a treat for me. Everything else on the menu was something everybody else may eat, but not me. I inquired him to cut back on one of the other sides instead, but he didn't need to budge. The circumstance was getting tense, and I felt totally unheard. That's when I snapped. I told my brother that on the off chance that the as it were arrangement was to cut my dish, I would fare and not go to Christmas. I figured it would be simpler to remain out of the dramatization and spend the day alone. I wasn't willing to work difficult for a dinner I couldn't eat, and I couldn't bear to purchase my possessed dish either. It felt just like the best choice at the time. I mean, in the event that I wasn't planning to eat anything besides, what was the point? My brother was angry. He said that wasn't what he implied, which he didn't want me to skip Christmas. But in my intellect, I had as of now chosen. It seemed just like the most coherent arrangement. Everybody might still appreciate the devour, and I wouldn't got to endure through an awkward circumstance. The repercussions of this discussion was nothing brief of chaotic. My brother was irate, and so was my mother. Everybody was frantic at everybody else, and I was cleared out feeling harmed and separated. I begun to address whether I had made a tremendous botch by pushing so difficult for what I needed. But at that point, something startling happened. My mother chosen to bolster me, and she said that she would spend Christmas at my put rather than my brother's. She supported me up, which only fueled the fire within the family. The situation stayed tense for a whereas, but 1 or 2 of days afterward, my brother came to my house to conversation. And this is often where the story takes a shocking turn. He begun by apologizing for his behavior, conceding that he had acted ineffectively. What stunned me the foremost was when he opened up almost why he had responded the way he did. He shared that when we were kids, our family went through a few genuine money-related battles. I do not keep in mind it, but it had a profound effect on him. His fear of overspending and his uneasiness approximately funds had been driving his response. He clarified that when I proposed my menu and said the costs, it activated all of those ancient tensions. Within the warmth of the minute, he hadn't considered how his activities would influence me, particularly since I would have nearly nothing to eat in the event that my dish was evacuated. After hearing my brother's statement of regret and understanding his viewpoint, we come to a modern understanding. He advertised to pay for my dish, and we concurred to make the feast more collaborative. Whereas I would still do most of the cooking, he guaranteed that they would pitch in more with the labor, especially with the cleanup, which, in the event that you inquire me, is the most noticeably awful part. We agreed that my fundamental dish would be included within the family budget, and I would send over formulas and enlightening for my side. This way, they may offer assistance out without taking absent my commitment. It was an enthusiastic minute, and I realized that whereas my brother's cheapness had caused a few pressure, his heart was within the right put. He didn't need to take off me out, and he was really too bad for the way he'd acted. It was a step within the right heading for him, and I felt like we were all moving toward a more conscious understanding. So, after all the pressure, expressions of remorse, and compromises, it looks like we'll be having Christmas together after all. Beyond any doubt, there were bumps along the way, but we came out more grounded on the other side. Within the conclusion, it wasn't approximately the nourishment or the cost, it was almost family and understanding each other's needs. I'm still doing most of the work for Christmas supper, but I feel just like the circumstance is reasonable presently. The dramatization is behind us, and I trust this occasion season will be filled with cherish, regard, and a part less push. I'm truly thankful for the back from my mother, who stood by me when I required it most. And whereas I'm not idealized in this entire circumstance, I've learned a parcel approximately communication, compromise, and understanding. Story 3. Breaking free, why I had to distance myself from my family's toxic culture. Since taking off domestic for college a long time prior, I am a 21-year female and have begun to understand how much my family elements contributed to the uneasiness and discouragement I experienced throughout my school a long time ago. The more time I went through absent from domestic, the more I realized how profoundly my family's behavior, particularly their need for boundaries and casual approach to delicate topics, had influenced my mental well-being. Growing up, my family's way of life adjusted to numerous generalizations of a working-class family. Most of my relatives were dedicated plant laborers, but our history is perplexed with challenges. Eras of my family were caught in cycles of youngster pregnancies, substance manhandling, and destitution. My mother, sister, and grandmas all got to be moms as young people. My 15-year-old cousin invited her moment child. Liquor abuse and medication reliance were common on both sides of the family, and even though everybody worked difficult, it regularly felt like chaos was the as it were consistent. Going to a college distant from domestic was a life-changing involvement. Abruptly, I was encompassed by peers who had developed up in unfathomably diverse circumstances. For the first time, I saw how others lived and realized how distinctive my claimed childhood had been. Companions at school were stunned when I casually said things like my sister's adolescent pregnancy or the steady drinking at family social occasions. Through these discussions, I came to see my mother's standard drinking propensities as alcoholism, a realization that made me feel severely and sold out. The more I went by domestic, the more my mental well-being disintegrated. My uneasiness and discouragement, which I had worked so difficult to overcome at school, would return with retribution the minute I ventured through the entryway. At the heart of my distress was my family's behavior around delicate subjects. My guardians, for illustration, had no sense of protection or boundaries. When we traveled and had to share tight spaces, like a room or camper, they would lock in behavior I found unseemly. I keep in mind lying wakeful, tears rolling down my confront, wishing for the kind of regard that appeared so normal to others. Indeed, standard discussions with my guardians may feel obtrusive. In case I said a male companion or a potential relationship, their questions would immediately turn individual in ways I wasn't comfortable with. Is he into you for your looks, or have you two taken things assist yet? These comments were continuously surrounded as jokes, but they didn't feel amusing to me. The need for boundaries amplified family get-togethers. Occasions were particularly troublesome since I couldn't elude the comments and behavior that made me so awkward. Relatives would make comments about my appearance, some of the time indeed touching me energetically in ways that felt intrusive. Female family individuals would bother me almost my individual life, inferring things approximately my encounters at college that weren't genuine. I observed comparable behavior coordinated toward my cousins, who regularly giggled it off, but it made me feel profoundly uneasy. I at last chose to talk up. Not only that, but I asked my guardians to halt making certain comments, clarifying how much they bothered me. To begin with, they appeared to get it, but their behavior didn't alter. The comments and jokes crawled back into our discussions, and I began to feel like my boundaries weren't being regarded at all. Over time, occasions and visits got to be something I feared. The combination of improper comments, the need for physical and enthusiastic boundaries, and the overpowering sense of being disrespected cleared me sincerely depleted. Inevitably, I have chosen I couldn't proceed subjecting myself to that environment. I moved all of my assets out of my parents' domestic and into my college rental. I've made it clear that I still care for them and arrange to call frequently, but I do not visit for expanded periods or remain overnight. They've deciphered this choice as me disowning them. They say that college has changed me, that I'm acting prevalent and embarrassed of where I come from. In a few ways, they're not wrong. I am humiliated by a few of their behavior. It's come to the point where I've maintained a strategic distance from presenting my companions to my family or welcoming anybody to visit my childhood domestic. I feel blameworthy almost that, but I also know that I have to prioritize my mental well-being. In some cases, I ponder in case I'm blowing up. Am I fair, being as well delicate? Perhaps their behavior isn't as bizarre as I think it is. After all, I've continuously been awkward with certain angles of college culture, like overwhelming drinking and casual connections, so maybe my family's behavior hits a nerve. But profound down, I know it's not fair to me. Feeling disrespected, awkward, and hazardous around the individuals who are assumed to cherish and bolster you isn't normal, it's a sign that something should alter. I cherish my family, but I've realized that cherish doesn't cruel enduring behavior that hurts you. It isn't cruel to relinquish your piece of intellect or self-respect. Removing myself is the hardest choice I've ever made, but it's also the foremost important. For my well-being and future, I got to set boundaries and make a life that feels secure and fulfilling, even on the off chance that means reclassifying what family looks like for me.